In this tutorial, you'll learn how to navigate and look around. Then you'll make your first takeoff and landing. On screen right now, you can see the kneeboard. All of the instructions in this tutorial are recorded on the Messages page. The Briefing page displays the mission briefing. To close the kneeboard, click the X in the upper right corner. To open it again, press Shift F10. You're sitting in an Air Creation Trike Ultralight at the end of runway 15 at Edwards Air Force Base in California. This is one of the longest runways in the world, the same runway the Space Shuttle sometimes lands on. In missions, you can navigate using the mission compass and the mission pointer. See the gauge in the upper left corner of the screen? That's the mission compass. The little triangle on the outside of the rotating heading indicator points to the selected objective or item of interest. The text below the indicator tells you the name of the objective, its altitude above sea level, as well as your distance from it. See the big marker in front of you? That's the mission pointer. It points to objectives or items of interest. In some missions, there will be more than one objective or item of interest. You can change which item the mission compass and pointer point to by pressing the K key. You can hide the mission compass and pointer by pressing the U key. To look around, move the hat switch on top of your joystick, or press and hold the space bar, then move the mouse to look around. Feel free to experiment by looking around your aircraft now. You can also try different views by pressing the F9, F10, F11, and F12 keys. When you're done experimenting with views, press 1 to progress to the next phase of this tutorial. You can control an aircraft in Flight Simulator by using a joystick, a universal controller, the mouse, or the arrow keys on the keyboard. Time to go flying. You're going to start the engine, release the brakes, take off, fly through some gates, and then land again. First, move the throttle to idle. If you don't have a joystick or a universal controller, press the F1 key. Next, start the ultralight's engine. Press Ctrl E or click the ignition switch on the instrument panel. You can control the throttle using the throttle lever on a joystick, by pressing buttons on a universal controller, or by pressing the F1, F2, F3, and F4 keys on the keyboard. The instructions in this tutorial are generalized to apply to any of these methods. For details about using different types of controllers, refer to the quick reference card or to the briefing for this mission. Now, release the parking brake. Pull the trigger button on your joystick or press the period key. Ready for takeoff? Smoothly advance the throttle to full. If you don't have a joystick, press the F4 key. Taking off is easy. At about 30 miles per hour, gently pull the stick towards you, and the aircraft will fly off the runway. Pull back on the stick a bit. Congratulations, you're flying! Pull back gently on the stick and climb a bit to fly through the first gate you see in front of you. Great! Now climb a bit more and fly through the second gate. Now reduce the throttle a bit and slow down. The next gate is a little lower than the last one, and you'll be landing once you get through it. Good job! Now reduce the throttle all the way and use the stick to adjust your descent rate. Pull back slightly on the stick and level out. Try to float over the runway as long as possible. Now brake. Pull the trigger on your joystick or press the period key. Come to a complete stop. Nice landing. Press escape to end the mission, or take off again to off again on your own. In this short tutorial, you'll practice flying an ultralight aircraft through a marked course. Just as in Tutorial 1, the instructions are generalized to apply whether you're flying with a joystick, a universal controller, the mouse, or the keyboard. For details about using different types of controllers, refer to the quick reference card or to the briefing for this mission. Directly ahead of you is a series of large square gates to fly through. To get to the first gate, just climb. Gently pull back on the stick to raise the nose of the ultralight. To go faster as you climb, increase the throttle. Push the throttle lever forward or press the F3 key. Active gates that you need to fly through are glowing green. Gates that aren't active or that you have already flown through are red. The next gate will not highlight until you have passed through the current gate. If you lose sight of a gate, look around. Move the hat switch on top of your joystick or press and hold the spacebar and move the mouse. Remember, you can review all the instructions given to you on the kneeboard. Just press Shift F10 and select the Messages page. Another tip, press the P key to pause the mission. Press it again to resume. Good job negotiating Gate 1. Now fly through Gate 2. Okay, now descend to Gate 3. Push forward on the stick a bit to gently lower the nose. Slow down during the descent by reducing the power. Pull back on the throttle lever or press the F2 key. Nice descent to Gate 3. Now level off. Gently pull back on the stick. Notice that as you level off, the ultralight slows down. Set your speed by adjusting the throttle. Gate 4 is next. To turn toward it, gently move the stick to bank the wings in that direction. Then center the stick. To stop turning, move the stick back to the right and roll the wings level. Great job with Gate 4. Now turn to line up with Gate 5. Congratulations! Your first attempt at flying was a success. You can end the tutorial now or keep flying. Press the escape key at any time to end the mission. The remaining gates are just for fun. try flying through them in any order you want. As you fly, remember, in general, if you keep the nose on the horizon, you'll maintain altitude. If the nose is pointed up, you'll climb. If it's pointed down, you'll descend. There are 7 bonus gates remaining, including one on a ship. There are 6 bonus gates remaining. Five bonus gates to go. There are only 4 gates left. Three more bonus gates. Only 2 gates remain. You've done a great job. One last gate to go. Congratulations! You're well on your way to mastering the ultralight. Press the escape key and move on to the next tutorial or another mission. You're getting too slow. Speed up by increasing the power or lowering your nose by pushing on the stick. In this tutorial, you'll take off, fly to 3 different hot air balloons, and return to land at this airport. To start the engine, press Ctrl E or click the ignition switch on the instrument panel. Pull the trigger button on the joystick to release the parking brake or press the period key. Push the throttle lever away from you or press the F4 key to accelerate. Now pull back on the stick to lift off. In order to find the hot air balloons, use the mission compass and the mission pointer. Press the K key to move the pointer between the 3 hot air balloons. You only need to fly near the balloons to achieve the mission objectives. Feel free to approach them from any angle. That's 1 balloon, 2 more to go. That's the 2nd balloon. 1 left. You've flown near all the balloons. Congratulations! Now it's time to turn back and land at the airport. Since the wind is calm, you can approach the airport from any direction. The mission compass and mission pointer have moved to show you where the airport is. This airport has 2 small grass strips and 1 long concrete runway. For an extra challenge, feel free to land on one of the grass strips. Grass strips can be hard to see. In this tutorial, the grass strips are highlighted in yellow to help you find them. You can also cycle the mission compass and mission pointer between them using the K key. Now that you're heading toward the airport, reduce power to slow to 60 miles per hour or less. Before you land, make sure your throttle is at idle. Just before you touch down, ease the stick back slightly and let the aircraft settle to the ground. You're going a bit too fast to have a safe landing. Reduce your speed to 50 miles per hour or less. Try moving the stick more gently. Good job landing back at the airport. In this tutorial, you'll learn how to move an airplane on the ground, or taxi. Taxiing is important since you'll have to get from your parking spot to the runway in order to take off, and back after you land. You'll be practicing your taxiing skills in several aircraft, but we'll start with the familiar Trike Ultralight. You're starting in spot plane view in this tutorial, so it's easy to see where your aircraft is. Use your joystick's hat switch or the mouse to look around your plane. To begin taxiing, start the engine and nudge the throttle up just a little to start moving. Use the throttle and brakes to control your speed. You don't want to taxi much faster than 5 miles per hour. To turn while taxiing, twist your joystick or press 0 or Enter on your keyboard's number pad. Slow down. Going too fast while taxiing can be dangerous. Good job. You can save a mission in progress at any time by pressing the semicolon key. Saving is useful if you don't have time to complete an entire mission, or if you've just made it through a difficult part. That way you don't have to refly the whole mission if you make a mistake. In this tutorial, you might want to save the mission each time you switch to a new airplane. Make gentle movements. Up ahead is the Piper J3 Cub. Move close to it and we'll switch you into that aircraft for a bigger challenge. Great, you're now in a Piper Cub. The Cub is a bit more difficult to handle than the ultralight, but not much. Taxi slowly. Fast movements increase the possibility of tipping over. Great job taxiing. Up ahead is a Douglas DC-3. Move close to it so you can get some experience taxiing in a big plane. All right, you're now in a Douglas DC-3. Your goal is to taxi to the beginning of the runway and take off. The DC-3 is a more difficult plane to taxi. Unlike the ultralight and the Cub, this plane relies a lot more on using the brakes to help you swing the tail around. The DC-3 has a tail wheel lock, which makes it easier to taxi. With the lock off, like it is right now, the tail can swing freely during turns. With the lock on, it's easier to taxi straight ahead. Press Shift-G to lock or unlock the tail wheel. Remember, your goal is to take off once you're on the runway. Taking off in the DC-3 is easy. Just line up with the runway and push the throttle forward all the way. Pull back on the stick when you're going about 60 miles per hour. Pull back now to take off. Congratulations, you're in the air flying the DC-3. Feel free to keep flying or press Escape to end the mission. In this tutorial, you'll be learning how to approach an airport for landing. You're flying in a Piper Cub about 5 miles northwest of the Eagle Creek Airport, which is directly ahead of you. Adjust the throttle to maintain about 70 miles per hour for the approach. The runway in use right now at Eagle Creek is runway 3, which runs right to left. To land, you first need to line up with the runway. Waypoint markers have been placed to suggest a good flight path for the landing. Remember, to look around, move the hat switch on top of your joystick, or press and hold the spacebar, then move the mouse. Turn to the right now to follow the markers. The mission compass in the upper left corner of your screen will point to each marker in sequence. Look to the left. You should be flying parallel to the runway as we fly past the airport to set up for landing. At this point in an approach, you would normally slow the aircraft down to prepare for landing. This cub is slow enough that you don't need to slow down. Just keep flying at about 70 miles per hour. At this point, we're flying on what is called the downwind leg of the traffic pattern. Now make a gentle turn to the left onto the base leg and follow the markers toward the runway. Try to maintain 70 miles per hour throughout the turn. Great. Now turn onto final and line up with the last three markers. Adjust the throttle to slow down to 60 miles per hour. The runway is at an altitude of 794 feet. Adjust the throttle to slow to 55 miles per hour. As you near the runway, reduce the throttle all the way and very gently pull back on the stick to level off. Stay as close to the ground as possible without landing. Eventually, the wheels will touch down. You're doing well. Keep it steady. You're almost there. Reduce the throttle all the way to idle and get ready to land. Great, you're on the ground. Coast to a stop or apply the brakes. You've done it. You've successfully landed. In this tutorial, you'll be learning how to take off and land on very short mountain airstrips with tall trees nearby. It's very important to use the flaps during short takeoffs and landings. Flaps serve two purposes. They generate more lift, and they cause drag, which slows the plane down. Before taking off, you should extend the flaps one notch by pressing the F7 key. If you want to watch how the flaps change the look of your wing, you can switch to Spot View by pressing the F11 key. Press F9 to return to Virtual Cockpit View. To start the engine, press Ctrl-E. Try to take off when you reach 55 knots and climb out at 60 knots, which will give you the best angle of climb in this aircraft. Pull back now to lift off. Great takeoff. Now that you're in the air, retract the flaps by pressing the F6 key. Your landing spot will be the Lower Loon airstrip to the south of your present position. It's very short and surrounded by hills, so it will be difficult to land on if you approach the runway from the wrong direction. The best route to the Lower Loon is to follow the river valley rather than flying straight over the hills. This will allow for a shallower approach for landing. You can follow the waypoint markers if you want. We're about halfway to Lower Loon. This might be a good time to go over some bush flying tips. In real bush flying, you should always overfly the runway before landing to check the runway condition and to look for obstacles which could contribute to an unsafe landing. Even in Flight Simulator, it's a good idea to inspect a landing site before committing. Many of the mountain strips in this area are one-way in, one-way out approaches, and you only get one chance at the landing with no possibility of a go-around. If you need to turn around within the confines of a valley or a canyon, you can perform a canyon turn by slowing the aircraft down and dropping the flaps. With this technique, you can minimize your turn radius as long as you keep the power up and stay above stall speed. As you approach Lower Loon, start slowing down early in preparation to land, or to execute a canyon turn if you need to turn around. Now that you're getting close to the airport, maintain 55 knots and fully extend the flaps by pressing the F8 key. Remember to increase power to compensate for the increased drag, or you might stall. When approaching at more than 60 knots, you might not be able to stop before you reach the trees at the end of the runway. Go around and try it again. Great landing. The ridge from beautiful Lake Tahoe. Minden is world-renowned for its soaring conditions, and many records have been set here over the years. Today looks like a great day for a lesson. You're sitting in the DG-808S, a state-of-the-art glider built for competition soaring. Today you'll get familiar with the features and flying characteristics of this sophisticated aircraft. The most obvious difference between a glider and a powered aircraft is its lack of an engine. To get in the air, you'll be towed aloft by another aircraft known as a tow plane or tug. Press Control-Shift-Y now to let the tow plane know you're ready for takeoff. Once you're moving, expect the glider to lift off much sooner than the tow plane. Be patient and just level out while the tow plane gains speed. There you go. You're airborne. Level off until the tow plane is off the ground. That beeping you're hearing is the variometer. I'll explain it later. There he goes. Just stay right behind the tow plane. Don't get too far above, below, or off to the side. If you're not careful, you can pull the tug off course. Done properly, he won't even know you're there. Go ahead and raise the landing gear now by pressing G. Visualize a box around the tow plane and try to keep the glider in that box at all times. You'll know you're getting outside that box when you can see the sides, top, or bottom of the tow plane. It's best to stay just a bit high on the tow. The wake from the tow plane's wings flows downward, so staying high will keep you in smooth air. You've only paid for a tow to 2,500 feet above the ground, so he'll expect you to release at that height. That's about 7,200 feet on the altimeter. The tow rope release is the yellow knob on the bottom left side of the instrument panel. To release the rope, you can click it or press Shift-Y, but don't touch it until you're at altitude. That would make for an awfully short flight. Speaking of shorter than expected flights, there comes a time in every glider pilot's career when he doesn't make it back to the airfield as intended. Either through bad decision-making or lack of lift, he or she has to put the glider down in a field. This is called landing out. It's actually quite routine in cross-country soaring, but it's embarrassing nonetheless. Okay, you're nearing 7,200 feet. Time to release from the tow rope. Pull the yellow knob to release the rope, then make a gentle right turn. Nicely done. Now level off and trim the glider to fly at 80 knots. Now that you're on your own and powerless, you'll need to find rising air to stay aloft. Keep flying straight and level, and I'll explain what to do next. Rising air, or lift, comes in a few different forms. The most common variety is a thermal. A thermal is simply a volume of air that's been heated by the sun and is hotter than the surrounding air. This causes it to rise into the sky in a column. On a sunny day, if you see a soaring bird flying in circles without flapping its wings, it's because it's found a thermal. This is exactly what you'll attempt to do. You'll generally find thermals rising above surfaces that absorb the sun's heat more than the surrounding terrain. Plowed fields, rock outcroppings, or concrete areas are always good bets. There's a large thermal over the fields just west of here. Head west so you can find some lift. Just like a powered aircraft, this glider has a vertical speed indicator that shows how fast the glider is rising or descending. It also has a variometer, which is a more precise instrument that indicates the vertical speed of the air you're flying through. You'll find the variometer just below the airspeed indicator. There's also an audio cue to help you find and stay in rising air. Beeping means the air is rising. The higher pitch the beeping, the faster the air is moving upwards. A steady tone means the air is either still or descending. The lower the tone, the faster the air is sinking. With these aids, as soon as you enter or exit a thermal, you'll know it. Okay, feel that turbulence? That's the telltale sign that you're close to a thermal. Just keep flying level and you should hit lift. Ah, there it is. Now fly circles inside the thermal to keep gaining altitude. Ready to test your skill? Above you is a green gate. Keep gaining altitude until you can glide through it. The gate is at 8,300 feet. You'll need to clear all 7 gates to successfully complete this mission. The secret to maximizing your time in a thermal is to stay slow. Try and keep your speed at 80 knots. Pull back on the stick to slow down. You should also be using a lot of rudder in your turns to keep the wings as level as possible. Watch your speed. Any faster and you'll overstress the airframe. Nicely done. Now that you're familiar with thermals, it's time to explore another type of lift, ridge lift. Fly west towards the mountains. There are 3 more gates there for you to fly through. All right, you're over the foothills. You should be feeling some lift soon. Ah, there it is. Nice smooth ridge lift. To stay in this lift, turn and fly parallel to the mountain. When you feel the lift waning, turn away from the mountain and do it again. Ridge lift occurs when the wind is blowing up and over a hill or a mountain. This generates an area of rising air or lift on the windward side of that hill. Instead of circling like you would in a thermal, to make the most of ridge lift, you'll fly a back and forth pattern in front of the hill. You'll gain altitude with every pass. There are some dangers associated with ridge lift. You're flying in close proximity to the mountains, so there's no room for error. Always turn away from the hill. There are also turbulent areas of downward moving air on the downwind sides of hills and mountains. This sinking air can drag you right into the hillside, so always stay on the side of the mountains that the wind is blowing from. See the series of gates along this ridge? Keep climbing until you can clear them all on one pass. There's one gate. Good job. One more. Nicely done. Okay, take a rest and cruise for a bit. Head west over the ridge toward Lake Tahoe. See the last set of gates? Head in that direction. Trim the glider to fly at 100 knots. You may encounter some sink on the other side of the ridge. Just head west. There's plenty of lift on the other side. The last type of lift to know about is wave lift. Wave lift is similar to ridge lift, except it occurs much higher up, above and behind the ridge line. When air is disturbed, it acts a lot like water and creates ripples and waves. As an air mass moves up and over a mountain range, it pushes the air above it up and out of the way. This disturbance causes a wave motion that can extend out many miles. This is wave lift. Keep in mind, though, that the air masses between the waves are sinking. Many soaring altitude and distance records have been set after finding a good wave. It's a rare day you find a good wave, and today the winds are just right. Just keep heading west and watch for smooth rising air. Okay, there it is. A nice smooth wave of rising air. Slow again to 80 knots to get the most out of it. The waves run parallel to the mountain range. You can climb in the wave, flying a pattern much like you did on the ridge, or you can just keep flying straight along the mountains. Try and line yourself up to fly through the next set of gates. The first gate is at an altitude of 14,700 feet. Ready to learn some more about this glider? A heavier aircraft penetrates the air better as it has more inertia. This means more speed. Many racing sailplanes carry ballast so they can fly faster. Ballast is weight added to the aircraft in the form of water. This extra weight means the glider won't thermal as well, so sometimes in low lift areas you'll need to drop that extra weight. This is done by opening valves to jettison the water. Don't do it now as you'll need the speed to get home, but the valves are controlled by the chrome handles on the right side of the cockpit. Next subject, flaps. Lift itself creates drag, and drag slows you down. Gliders usually have an enormous amount of extra lift. When you fly fast, this extra lift isn't needed. It just slows you down. To reduce the lift, this glider features a negative flap setting. Once the flaps are at 0 degrees, just press F6 again to move the flaps into the negative range. To set the flaps to neutral again, press F5. Another way to reduce lift in gliders is by using the spoilers, vertical plates on top of the wings that can be extended to spoil the lift and cause drag. Spoilers are generally used to slow the glider down for the descent and landing. Modern gliders are so efficient that you have to do something to coax them to the ground. In the DG808S, the spoilers are controlled by the blue handle on the left side of the cockpit. That's one. And another. Very nice. One more. That's it. Well done. It's like magic, isn't it? No engine at all and you've climbed this high. You can either keep soaring this wave or head back to Minden. It's up to you. This is the perfect time for those negative flaps. Press F5, then F6, and watch your speed increase. Careful not to exceed 140 knots. All right, almost home. With this much extra altitude, you'll need some help getting down quickly. Fully extend the speed brakes by pressing the slash key and lower the nose to maintain at least 80 knots in the descent. Time to line up with the runway before you lose too much altitude. Retract the speed brake and make sure flaps are neutral by pressing F5. For now, head right over the airport. That way you can make sure the runway is clear. Go ahead and dump your ballast if you haven't already. Turn the chrome handles on the right side of the cockpit. Approach the airport from the north and land on runway 12G. Use the grass strip so you're not in the way of powered aircraft. See that small grass strip next to runway 30? That's where you'll put it down. Looks clear. Go ahead and turn north. Touchdown! Now keep the wings level as long as possible. Very nice. Great flight today.
This flight is just a quick 35-mile repositioning from Edinburgh to Glasgow without any passengers on board. A good opportunity to get you checked out on the Bombardier CRJ 700. While we're waiting in line for takeoff, I'll explain a few things. Flying a modern jet isn't really all that different from flying a small prop plane. There are just a handful of key differences. The first thing you'll notice is how different the instrument panel looks. Instead of many small, round mechanical instruments, there are just a few large computer screens. Most of the information is the same, but the presentation is different.
World Travel 221, hold short runway 6 right, traffic is a 747 and final.
Holding short 6 right, World Travel 221.
That call was for another aircraft. We're Orbit 526. I'll handle the radios during this flight, so don't worry if you miss anything. I'll tell you what to do. The display on the left is the primary flight display, or PFD. It combines multiple instruments into one display. The blue and brown section in the middle of the PFD is an attitude indicator. The vertical tape on the left side shows airspeed, and the tape on the right side shows altitude. At the bottom in the middle is a horizontal situation indicator, which shows heading, and to the right of that is a vertical speed indicator. Glass displays like these take some time to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, you'll love them. The display to the right of the PFD is the navigation display, which shows a top-down view of the aircraft's position relative to navigational aids and the flight planned route. You can change how the map looks by using the format and range knobs on the left side of the panel. Try it now if you want to. Okay, the third display is the Engine Indication and Crew Alerting System, or ICAS. The default page shows engine information, gear and flap positions, fuel quantity, and warning and caution messages. You can scroll through the different ICAS screens by clicking the up and down buttons at the bottom of the display. Each screen provides information about a different aircraft system. For this flight, keep the engine gauges showing on the ICAS. The top gauges are labeled N1. As we fly, I'll give you suggested thrust settings. Use your joystick throttle lever or the F2 and F3 keys to move the N1 needles to the settings I suggest. The rows of buttons and knobs just below the windshield is the mode control panel for the autopilot. We won't be using the autopilot on this flight, so don't worry about any of that for now. A big difference between jets and piston aircraft is that in a jet, the engines take a while to spool up. This means that if you add or reduce thrust, there will be a slight delay before your action has any effect. This fact, combined with the jet's higher speed, means that you need to plan ahead.
World Travel 221, taxi into position and hold.
Position and hold, World Travel 221.
Jets have flaps just like piston aircraft. They're used during takeoff and landing to increase both lift and drag. Lower the flaps to 20 degrees for takeoff now by pressing the F7 key 3 times. You can see the flap indicator on the ICAS.
Orbit 526, hold short runway 6 right.
We'll hold short 6 right, Orbit 526. Okay, follow the 737 ahead of us, but hold short of the runway. Release the brakes by pressing the period key and apply some thrust to get us going. Good. Stop here. One last thing. During the takeoff roll, I'll call out 4 speeds. When I call 80 knots, glance at your airspeed tape to verify it's moving and indicating approximately the same speed as mine. When I call V1, it means we're at the speed where we're committed to taking off because there isn't enough runway to stop at that point. When I say rotate, gently pull back on the stick and rotate the nose into the air. Finally, I'll call V2 when we reach the minimum safety speed at which we can safely climb on just one engine if there's a failure.
World Travel 221, winds calm, clear for takeoff.
World travel 221, rolling.
Orbit 526, taxiing to position and hold.
Position and hold, orbit 526. Okay, we're cleared to taxi onto the runway, but not to take off yet. Taxi ahead and turn right onto the runway. Stop once you're on the runway and lined up with the center line. Press Shift 5 to display the overhead panel and turn on the landing light by clicking the switch in the lower left corner. Then press Shift 5 again to close the overhead. Before we take off, let's review exactly what will happen. You'll control the aircraft, I'll handle the radios. I'll call out 80 knots, V1, rotate, and V2. When I say rotate, gently pull back on the stick to raise the nose to 15 degrees nose up on the primary flight display. I'll tell you to retract the landing gear once we're climbing. Once we reach 1,000 feet above the runway, I'll tell you to pitch down to 10 degrees nose up and to raise the flaps so we can accelerate. Our initial climb will be to our cruise altitude of 6,000 feet, and the departure controller will probably tell us to make a left turn to the west. I'll let you know when to turn.
Orbit 526, winds are calm, runway 6 right, clear for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, orbit 526. All right, we're cleared to go. When you're ready, use the throttle lever on your joystick or press the F3 key to add thrust. Start with 50% N1. Let the engine stabilize and then increase thrust to 100%. Knots. V1. Rotate. Slowly pitch up to 15 degrees. V2. Positive rate, gear up. Raise the landing gear by pressing the G key.
Orbit 526, contact departure.
Orbit 526, switching. Okay, move the stick to adjust pitch to 10 degrees nose up on the primary flight display and raise the flaps. Reduce thrust to about 80% N1 to keep our speed below 250 knots. Climb and maintain 6,000 feet. Edinburgh departure, orbit 526 with you, climbing to 6,000.
Orbit 526, roger. Orbit 526, turn left, heading 270.
Left to 270, orbit 526. Okay, it's time for the turn. Make a nice easy left turn until our heading is 270 degrees. That's due west. Let's run through the after takeoff checklist. Landing gear, up. Level off at 6,000 feet and reduce thrust to about 60% N1. That should give us about 250 knots. Flaps, up. We're above our assigned altitude. Descend to 6,000 feet. We'll stay low on this short flight, so don't exceed 250 knots and keep the landing lights on. This is standard practice below 10,000 feet. Thrust set to 80% N1 for the climb. After takeoff checklist complete.
Orbit 526, resume own navigation.
Don't exceed 250 knots below 10,000 feet. Resume own navigation, orbit 526. All right, we've been told to resume our own navigation. This means the controller will no longer be giving us vectors, and we should follow our filed flight plan. Our flight plan route takes us to a point that will line us up for an approach to Glasgow's runway 23, which is currently the active runway. You can use the mission compass to navigate to that point, or you can follow our flight plan on the map page of the navigation display. The pink line on the screen is the path we should be following.
Orbit 526, contact Glasgow approach on 119.1.
Orbit 526 switching. Thanks. Glasgow approach, Orbit 526 with you.
Orbit 526, Glasgow approach. Good morning. Reduce speed to 210 knots. Expect vectors for the visual approach, runway 23 at Glasgow. Glasgow altimeter 29902.
Slowing to 210 and we'll expect the visual for runway 23, Orbit 526. Bring the thrust back to about 50% N1, then adjust it to maintain 210 knots. Since the weather's good, the controller will line us up with the runway and give us clearance to proceed to the airport visually once we have the runway in sight.
Orbit 526, descend and maintain 3000.
Descend and maintain 3000, Orbit 526. Okay, we've got clearance to descend to 3,000 feet. Reduce thrust to idle and gently push forward on the stick to take us down. Pitch to about 7 degrees nose down to maintain 210 knots as we descend. Okay, level off here at 3,000 feet and bring the thrust back up to about 50% N1 to maintain 210 knots.
Orbit 526, reduce speed to 180 knots.
Slowing to 180, Orbit 526. Okay, now reduce thrust a bit to slow to 180 knots. Pull back on the stick a bit to keep the nose from dropping. Maintain 3,000 feet as you slow down. Press F7 twice to lower the flaps to 8 degrees. The flaps will slow us down, so bring the thrust back up to about 60% N1 so we maintain 180 knots.
Orbit 526, turn left heading 230, vectors for the visual approach runway 23, report the runway in sight.
Left to 230, looking for the runway, Orbit 526. Here we go, turn left to 230 degrees. We should see the runway straight ahead once we roll out. Okay, I see the runway. Approach, Orbit 526 has the runway in sight.
Orbit 526, cleared visual approach runway 23.
Cleared for the visual, Orbit 526. Reduce thrust to idle and begin descending towards the runway. Lower the landing gear by pressing G and lower full flaps as we slow down. Press F7 3 times. In a large aircraft like this, the speed you land at changes depending on how heavy you are. At our current weight, our final approach speed will be 130 knots. Adjust thrust to maintain 130 knots as we descend toward the runway.
Orbit 526, contact tower on 118.8.
Switching to tower now, orbit 526. Thanks. Glasgow Tower, orbit 526 with you on the visual approach for runway 23.
Orbit 526, Glasgow Tower, you're number 1. Cleared to land runway 23. Wind calm.
Clear to land, orbit 526. We're cleared to land, so let's run through the before landing checklist. It's a short one. Landing gear, down. Flaps, set to 45 degrees. Landing checklist complete. Continue descending. Once we're about 50 feet over the runway, reduce thrust to idle and pull back on the stick slightly to touch down on the main wheels first. Then slowly lower the nose. Nice landing.
Orbit 526, turn left next taxiway and contact ground on 121.7.
Ground on 121.7, orbit 526. Turn left on the next taxiway. Once you're clear of the runway, stop, retract the flaps, and turn off the landing lights. Glasgow ground, orbit 526, clear of 23.
Orbit 526, taxi to the gate. Follow the 737 on the taxiway all the way to the ramp.
We'll follow the 37, orbit 526. Okay, just follow that 737 on the taxiway. He's going to the same ramp, just a different gate. Make a right turn into this area. Our gate is the last one on the right side. There's our gate at the end. Pull up to the jetway and stop. stop here. Excellent job.
Ready to learn the basics of flying a helicopter? Generally speaking, the helicopter will move in the direction it's tilted. Push on the stick to tip the helicopter forward. Pull on the stick to tip it backward. To control where the nose is pointed, twist your joystick or press 0 or Enter on the keyboard number pad. You can climb and descend using the throttle. More power makes the helicopter climb, less power makes the helicopter descend. Try climbing and descending now, using the throttle. Tip forward to speed up, and tip backward to slow down. Adjust the throttle to maintain altitude. The slower you're moving, the more power you'll need to maintain altitude. Use the stick and throttle now to line up with gate 1. The active gate is glowing green, and the inactive gates are red. Reduce power and descend to gate 4. You're getting very slow. To increase speed, push on the stick. You're getting very low. Increase power and climb. Increase power and use the stick to climb to gates 7 and 8. Congratulations on finishing the introduction to helicopters. In Tutorial 9, you got a sense of how the Robinson R-22 helicopter feels once it's in the air. In this tutorial, you'll take off, fly through some gates, and land on or near the helipad that's inside the 5th gate. To take off, slowly add some power with the throttle just a little bit at a time, and the helicopter will rise when there's enough lift on the rotor blades. Push forward on the stick to start moving forward, and use power to control your altitude. You shouldn't need more than about half throttle most of the time. It will be easier to land if you fly through the gates slowly and in control. To slow down, pull back on the stick and adjust power to maintain altitude. You might want to slow down now to prepare to land in Gate 5. Reduce power to start descending through Gate 4 in an approach to land on the helipad in Gate 5. As in the other tutorials, the active gate is glowing green and the inactive gates are red. Adjust power and slowly descend into Gate 5. If you think you're descending too quickly, add more power. Use the stick to move the helicopter around.
Okay, that's Sitka straight ahead of us. Now that we're clear of the mountains, we can start descending toward the runway. Reduce power and let's start down. The wind is blowing from the west, so we'll land on runway 29er. We always want to land into the wind.
Sitka traffic. Caravan 25 Tango is on right base for runway 29er.
See that Cessna Caravan out there? We can follow him all the way to the airport. I'll announce our position so he knows we're here. Sitka traffic, Cessna 6 Charlie Mike, 8 miles southeast. We'll be straight in for runway 29er. We have the Caravan in sight.
Sitka traffic. Caravan 25 Tango is on final, runway 29er.
Follow the Caravan all the way in. Add a notch of flaps and slow down a bit. We can't land until he's off the runway. Okay, maneuver is necessary to start lining up with the runway. Slow to 65 knots and add the rest of the flaps as we slow down. Let's maintain 65 knots on final. Sitka traffic, Cessna 6 Charlie Mike on final for runway 29er.
Sitka traffic, Caravan 25 Tango is clear of the runway.
Okay, the runway is ours. Nice landing.
Glad you came to visit. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? The fly-in is just east of here, across the reservoir. Looks like we're all lined up for takeoff. Let's go flying. When you're ready, fly east to Eagle Creek Reservoir. The fly-in is just on the other side. Use the compass to check your heading. The fly-in is just on the southeast side of this lake. Hey, there's a bombing target in the middle of the lake. You can fly over it and drop some flower bombs. Hit it square and you'll get a reward. You've hit the target. Careful. It's not a good idea to fly into a flock of birds. Good job. You're a fine pilot. I'm getting too old to fly myself, so I don't get much use out of this dear old cub unless someone else comes along. Thanks for bringing me here.